Welcome to another episode of Not That Hard to Homeschool, the podcast for real people so that you can confidently, competently, and yes, even contentedly provide the high school education that is best for your teens and your family. I'm your host, Lisa Nehring from notthathardtohomeschool.com. Well, hey everybody, it is Lisa. Well, hey everybody, it's Lisa from It's Not That Hard to Homeschool. It really isn't that hard to homeschool. And I am so excited to have Julie Rohr from Excelsior Classes here with me today. Hopefully you heard the podcast with Jody Guerra, who was so fun to talk to about the changes in homeschooling over the past 25 years. But Julie is here to talk to us today about working with art students and the opportunities available to them. So Julie has taught for Excelsior Classes. She teaches the fine arts education. She is doing drawing, colored pencils, general art classes, and she's worked with clubs. She holds a BA in education with a focus on museum studies, which honestly sounds super fun to me. And she's taught in the online space for 15 years. So she's really a pioneer of online education. So excited to have you here, Julie. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to talk with your audience.
Yeah, I was an art kind of girl in high school, and the thing I always heard was you can never make a living as an artist.
Yep. I
Um,
know.
yeah, did you hear that too?
Well, yes. And I know a lot of parents that I've talked to over the years, their biggest concern is I don't want my student to, grow up to be a barista at a coffee shop. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's the destiny of every art student.
Right. Actually, we personally know a couple professional artists, and they are doing amazingly well, like not a little well, like they're traveling the
Mhm.
world, they're making multiple six figures, and they are doing really okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're just like the top 1%. They're like, you wouldn't know their names, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
They're not doing the
Hmm.
big rock concerts. They're like middle class people with a bachelor's degree in art or an MFT, or they're self-trained, honestly, and they're
Hmm.
really doing okay. So anyway, tell us what is your ideas about art students and why people should study art in high school. Let's start there, or even
Hmm.
before. And what can they do with it after high school?
Well, it's funny. I've been a homeschooling parent, and I've been involved in homeschooling other people's children, obviously, and was an art major myself back in high school, whatever that means in high school, and and early on, I think, and I maybe with your own children, or I know many of the listeners may have kids that start out and they just love all the arts and crafts and drawing and things like that. And as school progresses, some people, I'll say, grow out of it. They get busy doing other things, but you find that you have these kids that are always crafting and making and drawing. And when I was in school, when I was a student, that was my way that I related to the world.
Yeah.
And when I got to my senior year, I had a very um, helpful person who tried to guide me and suggested that I maybe be careful, that that was my own sort of ego talking, and maybe I should pursue other more noble pursuits, and it would be hard to get a job and all that. And so I did. And what I found was that no matter what I did, that creative part of me always seemed to come out. And I think that's true with many people. And so what I've realized over the years is that that's just who that person is.
Mhm.
Um, and so, as an art teacher, then I have the opportunity to meet kids that are on this journey.
Yeah.
And I think what has been the challenge for, especially for homeschool art students, is that they don't know what to do next. Their
Mhm.
parents may not know what to do next. And as you know, working in the homeschool communities, one of the challenges I think we have a lot of times is that there are no built-in guidance counselors,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you don't know what is next. You have to sort of figure it out yourself. And so over the years, being an art teacher and seeing so many students come through, it it became an interest of mine to figure out how to connect those students with the next step
Mhm.
after they get done with their homeschooling education. What do they do next?
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to really understand what are the best ways for homeschool students to pursue undergraduate studies in college, if that's something they're looking into, or what do they do with all that art knowledge? How do they get a job? How do they move forward? So that's how I came into all of this. And I think of all the things that I have done, that's been the most fulfilling, because I know that having a person who is creative
Mhm.
and being able to connect them to the next part of their journey is a real honor, because I know that they will go on from there, and that's going to be a direction in their life. It's not just, I taught you how to draw a doodle, but I set you on a path. And so that's been it really has been an honor for me over the
Yeah.
years.
I love
Yeah,
hearing that because I do think, art reflects culture so often, and it
absolutely.
also leads culture in so many ways. So
Yes.
artists it might feel like they're underrated, but they're such a powerful force in our
Hmm.
culture and in the world. And we see this like right now on TikTok, and on the other social media platforms. If you know how to perform or create, wow,
Hmm.
you can really make some change. So I love
Yeah.
what you're doing. I love that you're helping people channel. What's the next step? So what is your advice to parents with a really arty kid or a crafty kid? What would you say? I mean, the world has changed quite a bit
Yes.
the last
Yes.
couple of
Yes.
years.
Yes, it has. Yeah, it's, there's having an artsy student is kind of like saying I have an athletic student. That's a big spectrum, right?
Yes.
So I mean, we can kind of look at a couple of different let's look at a couple different paths. How
Yes.
about that?
Yes.
Because you're going to have a student that's everywhere from, I like to crochet,
Right.
and they're going to go into, studying fibers. And then, maybe your listeners can't see it, but both you and I are wearing pretty snazzy glasses.
Yeah. I was
We've
noticing yours.
Yeah, I got nice designs. So, you may have a student who is creative and is interested in product design. And obviously that doesn't sound like, I'm a starving artist working in a coffee shop. So you have web designers, you have animators, you have people working in the film industry, people working in marketing. There's so many areas.
Right.
So we could start with a
Yeah.
traditional approach. How's that? We'll start
Let's
with
do
that.
that. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously, like you said, the world is changing. Over through COVID, we have changes even in how people are getting into colleges. For
Yeah.
instance, SAT and ACT is all up for grabs.
Yeah.
Colleges have changed their requirements,
Yeah.
but we'll start with the most basic traditional approach, right? So, um, uh, uh, if you're a family who has an interest in sending your child to college, and your child happens to be creative and artistic, and they want to go to school to pursue something in that area, it's a very easy path, and it's a very good path. A lot of the homeschool families I know have really, I think, higher standards than many of the public schools, so
Mhm.
they're already at an advantage.
Yeah.
And if a student is interested in going to college for arts, you can really approach that, even that, in a lot of different ways. Usually, in in planning your high school curriculum, a lot of colleges will look for a rigorous high school curriculum, which will be 4 years of English and 3 or 4 years of math, and etc. A basic college prep,
Yeah.
high school resume.
Yeah.
And so an art student should also be
Yeah.
preparing in the same way.
Mhm.
And that gives them really a rounded body of information that they can draw from and bring into their creative process.
Mhm.
So it's very helpful. Um, then in your maybe junior year of school, maybe your early junior year, for people who are really planners, I suggest that in their early junior year, they just start having time with their students to sit down and look through the internet and see all kinds of opportunities of what art schools could look like. And there's everything from, the Harvard of art schools. You've got Rhode Island School of Design, or SAIC in Chicago, or Savannah Art School. There's lots there, but there are also really great programs in local community colleges, and I'll call them lesser known, smaller universities, public and private. So in your junior year is a great time to just do a web search and see what schools offer interesting
Mhm.
art options. That's not a commitment. It's just like dreaming,
Yeah.
right? Um, and there are a couple great websites that you can use, or you can just do a general Google search. But I know one that's great to search for colleges is a College Board.
Yeah.
Many people will be familiar with that because I think you can retrieve your SAT and ACT
Mhm.
scores there.
Right.
But they also have a section for career and college search,
Mhm.
which is really useful.
Awesome.
You can plug in things you're looking for. And the other one that I've also recommended is the College Vine. I think it's
Yeah.
collegevine.org, maybe,
Okay. I'll
or
put those
maybe
in the show notes.
.com. I don't know if it's a .com or .org, but it's College Vine. They have a similar situation where you can plug in. I'm looking for maybe fashion design or
Mm.
interior or graphic design, and you can look up colleges that maybe you've never heard of.
Yeah.
And both of those sites are great because they'll give things like the initial price tag, they'll give the acceptance rate, they'll give a base, like what your base GPA needs to be
Yeah.
to be considered. So that's a nice place to start. And if you're past your junior year, you can still do it, but I think it is intimidating, especially if you're the first child in the family or the only child. How do you start the college search? So they all start there, even for art students.
Yeah.
And then I think it's maybe grabbing a batch of maybe 15 schools where your student says, oh, this would be really interesting. And that's where you start. That's a good place to start.
I love it. Yeah, just doing some research because, when you mention design, that is like such an intriguing field and it's
Mhm.
just blowing up. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
because
Yeah.
everything's global right now. So,
Yes. Yep.
the world has just opened up in these unique ways that weren't really available 15 or 20 years ago
Oh,
or
yeah.
40, So I think doing a search like that is a great first step. That's a
Yeah.
fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Just seeing what is available.
Yeah, and it's hard to know, locally maybe, or the big name schools, but like I said, I have homeschooled children myself, and I'm really convinced the big name schools
Mhm.
have a lot to offer. I mean, obviously, if you go to MIT for biology,
Yeah.
that says a lot for you, but you could go to a community college for whatever your subject is. And if you make the right connections, you may find yourself in a very satisfying job. And if you are willing to do the work and network with people, you will find your way to what you really
Yeah.
want to do. There are ways. It's not just having the pedigree.
Right.
So
Right.
the pedigree helps, it jumpstarts you, but it's not essential.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think those are helpful. And then even going to see schools, even for art students, I think it's really important because um, the really neat thing about going to college for art is that it is going to be unique in that person's lifetime. They're
Mhm.
probably never going to be in a situation where they have that much concentrated study
Mm.
on in the arts
Yeah.
with that many other people who are also doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So um, even though they go as an individual, there is really a sense that it is a community of creators. And
Mhm.
so each different school or university is going to have a different feel. Some are going to feel more technical oriented. Some are going to feel more experimental. Some are going to feel more, earthy, crunchy, natural, and some are going to feel more high tech. And so it's a little bit like dating, I think. Part of the interesting thing about college search is that your student or your family, you're looking for a place where your student feels at home, where it resonates with them. And then as they apply to schools, the schools are looking for students who they feel will be most successful with the program they have to offer.
Yeah.
It's not really they're the most successful or they're the best artist. It's just who fits the
Yeah.
best. And
Yeah. That's a
so,
great point. I think
yeah,
I think it's important for parents to hear. It's not just so much that your kid is feeling comfortable, but that they fit into the program.
Yeah.
Because if they're not a good fit, I mean, colleges really want the kids to graduate
Yeah.
and go make a name for themselves so they can say, that's my alma mater.
Yes.
It's social proof.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think there's been so much pressure, in years, oh, I didn't get accepted. I'm not
yeah,
that good.
yeah,
It really, I think it is, has not, it has something to do with it, but doesn't have much to do with that. Really, I think it's like a teacher. The more times you see students, which ones fit into which
yeah,
slots. And
yeah,
that's not to pigeonhole people. It's just, you can see what tendencies work the best in
yes,
what you have to offer. So
yeah,
that's something good to keep in mind for students as they are applying, is that it isn't really an edict on you are a good artist or not. It's really just you are a good fit for
yeah,
our school.
yeah.
So
So if kids want to go to college for art, should they
mhm.
start creating a portfolio in high school? Is that
yeah, that's a
important?
yeah, that's a great question. I was going to say they should. Um many art programs will require it.
Mm,
Some will not. There's a few that will not, but many or most will. And creating a portfolio, there's a wide range of what you're going to be asked to do. But in general, um, you will be asked to submit, if you're asked to submit a portfolio, it'll usually be um, 10 to 15 pieces, 10 to 15 photos of your best work. So what I suggest is that students start, even in their junior year, to start to create or gather artwork for their portfolio.
mhm,
Schools will look at a few things. One of the things they'll look at is your breadth of experience, that you've had lots of different kinds of creative
mhm,
experiences and experiments.
yeah,
They'll also look at the depth of your experience. So they're going to look to see that as a student, you have picked either a topic or a media that you've really delved into a lot and really become really adept at um, uh, manipulating and using.
mm,
So, you're looking both broad and deep.
yeah,
So that is one thing that you're going to really want to consider. So if you're in your junior year and you really haven't delved into something um, in depth, I would suggest that in your junior year, you really pick something and you say, this year I'm really going to,
mhm,
whatever it is, I'm going to really work on watercolor. I'm
mhm,
really going to work on religious paintings. I'm really going to work on sculpture, whatever it is.
oh, yeah,
Pick one thing so that you really do have an area that you can really, really mine and see what you can get out of it. So
mm, yeah,
schools will look for that.
mhm,
Um, they will look for art in your portfolio that's been done in the last about year or 2 years. They really don't want something from eighth grade.
yeah,
As wonderful as it may have been, they really want to see what you're doing now.
yeah,
And they also want to see what potential you have.
mm,
So sometimes people will get a little nervous because maybe everything isn't quite perfect, but that's okay.
yeah,
You're looking for your best, but they're looking at, are you teachable? Are you open?
mhm,
Are you moldable?
mm,
Are you exploring?
I
And
love
now, are
it.
you set in your ways? Because if you're
Yeah,
set in your ways, then
yeah,
what can they offer you?
right. So
So,
I think this is a good time to just mention like having a teacher at this point, if you have a kiddo who really wants to go to college and has to put together a portfolio, having an experienced art teacher like Julie is really going to be like so beneficial to your kiddo because she's going to be able to say, let's explore this medium. And even if it doesn't look like maybe your best work, it shows something that people are looking for. Like you have a coach and I mean, I've worked with Olympic athletes. They have coaches for everything, for their
yes.
for their whatever sport they're in, for their eating, for their sleeping, for their
Yep.
for their weightlifting, all the things. And I think hiring somebody like Julie to say, okay, I want to really explore chalk pastels this year or watercolor or whatever, having somebody like this on your team is just going to take your kids so much farther faster.
Yeah, and it's really hard, as homeschooling parents, it parents are not the best judges of things necessarily.
It's
you
hard
know,
to it's
especially
hard to step away sometimes, right?
it is. It is, you know, and you know, I've had kids do. It sounds funny. I've had kids do. There's something called a blind contour drawing, where you don't look down at your paper. You look at the subject and you just draw. And a lot of times they'll come out really weird looking. But some of them are outstanding, and they've done great projects with them. Now, if your child does a blind contour drawing of you and then I ask you what you think, you might be mortified. So, you know, you should not be the judge of that. And
Right.
it
Yeah.
it is hard to, like you said, if we're a little bit jaded, and even students are a little bit judgmental of their own work. They may look at
Yeah.
it and say, "This is terrible," but I think having other teachers, whether it's online teachers or local live, there's so many opportunities for kids. If it's
Yeah.
at maybe a community art space, or different museums have programs, continuing education has programs.
Yeah.
There's so many places. So yeah, just talking with other people who are in the arts
Yeah.
will give students a different perspective on um on their own art and what's working and what's not. So yeah, I think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
And yeah, so as students, you know, start to gather all these things, they're going to get lots of ideas and they're going to try things. And then it's really maybe coming up with a batch of 20 or 30 pieces of work, and maybe sitting down with somebody you trust who is like that, who has a little bit of insight, and then sitting down with them and saying which ones,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And another thing students can do, and it's wonderful because of the internet. If they're looking at a higher profile school, say they want to shoot for the stars and they want to go to Rhode Island School of Design, which I think usually gets top ratings,
Yeah.
no matter when you look at the list.
Yeah.
Um, you can often do a web search and say accepted portfolios at, and then you can look up your school. So accepted portfolios at Rhode Island School of Design. And a lot of times people who have applied will sit there and they will walk through their portfolio and they'll show you their different pieces that were accepted. You can also find videos of rejected portfolio at these different colleges.
Interesting.
So that can be helpful because it gives you an idea of the kinds of things people
Yeah.
have sent in. It may also be intimidating
Yeah.
because you may think, "Oh, I'm not that. I can't do that." But just, you know, you be you,
Yeah.
and realize that you are going to find your place.
Yeah.
But that is a nice resource. There's lots of great resources out there, but I
Mhm.
think what the art students have to remember is first they have to have this massive body of work to pull from.
Yeah.
If they only make 10 pieces and then they hope that 10 pieces is going to get them in art school, no,
Yeah.
no, because
Yeah.
probably not. I mean, maybe, but
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah. So you know, so art school has its advantages. There's another recommendation I would say is the art prof.
Mm.
Theartprof.org maybe.
Mhm.
But there's a woman that is an adjunct professor at Rhode Island School of Design, and she has really wonderful advice for people who are actually developing their portfolio. And she has, I don't know how many videos, she's on so many streaming services, but you know, she'll talk about uh, things like printmaking and 3D art. Those are things that she doesn't see often in portfolios.
Mm.
She'll give advice on projects that you might try. So that's a
Wow.
really nice resource. And
Yeah.
she'll even go through, she's done many videos where she actually reviews portfolios.
Wow. Super
So
helpful. Yeah.
yeah, I love her stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I would say for kids looking to go to college, they're going to do that in their junior year. Take as much time as you can get because it takes a while to get the really good stuff. In the meantime, you know, if you have chances to take metal smithing class or a sewing class, keep creating
Yeah.
and exploring, but also keep compiling,
Yeah.
and then you should be set. And the way that they're doing it now, a lot of schools are asking for digital submissions.
Mm.
It
Interesting.
used to
Yeah.
be that you would actually need to go with
Yeah.
your portfolio and present, but most of them are doing digital now, and that can be easier. Um,
Mhm.
it can be trickier because you need to watch how you're photographing your artwork and make sure that's done well.
Yeah.
But
That's a whole skill set
it
in and of
is.
itself.
And and again, there's so many great resources on how to
Yeah.
photograph your art.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
So
What
super
about
important because presentation, I mean, you're an artist,
yeah,
right? So
right.
presentation is key. If you have great art that you photograph in a crummy way,
Yeah.
there's inconsistency there, right? So
Right. Yeah, good point. What about the student who doesn't want to go to college? They just don't, they want to be out crafting, creating, and they want to be interacting with their people. What do you suggest for those artists as
okay,
they're
that's then
launching into
that is,
adulthood?
yeah, that's a good option or a good question. So there are a bunch of people who do not want to go to college. They have no interest. And um, I would start with almost similar advice. I would say in your junior and senior year, be creating
Yeah.
lots of things and exploring because um, the only way you know where you want to go is to explore. A lot of times in high school, people say, "Oh, I don't want to take this class," and then even an English class, and they'll find some genre of literature that they never would have considered
Yeah.
had they not been forced into it.
Right.
So, um, in your all through high school, but in your junior and senior year, take as many art classes as you can. Then I would say take every opportunity that presents itself. So colleges may look for things like community service, for instance,
Mhm.
but that doesn't only mean that you should do those kind of things just to get into college. A lot of times you might have maybe a church you attend or an event that's going on, and they need somebody to design a flyer or create a t-shirt or even do a backdrop or an event where they need some big flower arrangements, any kind of thing. And somebody might turn to you as an art student and say, "You're creative, you're an artist, can you do this?"
Yeah.
Well, you know what I'd say? Just tell them yes.
Yeah.
Just tell them yes, no matter what. Yes, yes, I can do that. And then go figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Because it'll give you an opportunity to try something that's for real. It's not just a theoretical assignment, it's a real thing. And you will work with another person to be able to kind of get their vision and your talents or your skills matched up.
Yeah.
So that's the beginning of really understanding, I want to say, job skills.
Yeah.
I guess that would be right.
Yeah.
Working on a team. So you get those opportunities, and you may find that you do it once and then they say, "Hey, we really like what you did. Can you do this again for us?" And before you know it, you may work yourself into something of a regular situation.
Mhm.
And it may be volunteer work. It may be that you are asked, but I would say to start taking opportunities in your junior and senior year, anything creative, and
Mm.
try it.
Yeah.
And then as you're finishing up, I guess if you're not going to approach and go into college, you're going to probably need to consider what it is that you do want to do. Do you want to be, your own man and just make things and sell them, make art, make whatever? That's fine. That's an option. Do you want to try to get in and work with somebody? Do you want to work for a cabinet maker? Do you want to work at a floral shop? Do you want to do those kind of things? And so some of those things are going to involve you stepping out of your
Mhm.
comfort zone and starting to contact people
Yeah.
and even say to them, "Hey, I am an art student and I would like to learn, say, floral design." We have let me take an example. We have a, a chain grocery store near us, but they have a nice floral department. So maybe you go and you apply for a job there and you say, "I'm an art student. I would like to work in the floral department. I am willing to be trained. This is the knowledge I have," and see if you can get a job there and you get your foot in the door a
Yeah.
little bit.
I love it.
So it's going to, one of the things that's hardest for artists is to reach outside of their comfort zone sometimes.
Mhm.
It's a little nerve-wracking because you feel vulnerable.
Mhm.
You feel like you're going to be judged on your skills. And when you're in high school, you only have so many skills.
Yeah.
You've only had so much
Right.
time. I mean,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing you may consider is also creating a portfolio,
Mm.
so that you can, just like any job interview or resume would be useful, right? If Lisa, if you wanted to go interview with, I don't know, CBS to become an interviewer,
Yeah.
you would bring your portfolio of work.
Right.
And so even if you're not going to college, you obviously still have a portfolio of work,
Mhm.
and you may want to either create your own,
Yeah.
there are so many ways to create online digital portfolios, but you may want to do that. You may want to use something like Instagram to have like a running portfolio of what you're creating.
Yeah.
You may want to use a portfolio, an artist site. It just depends on what you're interested in doing,
Yeah.
really.
I would
But
say too, for anybody who wants to just dive into the world of art, take some entrepreneurship classes and maybe some business classes.
yes,
Because like
yes,
I've talked about this so much, our kids are going to be working and living in a global gig economy. And so they
yes,
need to know how to present themselves and sell their stuff and close the sale and all those
yep,
important business type of things. And if you're an
yep.
artist, you might not think of yourself in that way. But
Mhm.
if you don't have money to pay for somebody to promote you, guess what? You're the promotional team.
That's right. And that's probably the second most important thing that artists need to know is business.
Yeah.
If especially if they're gonna if they are working for themselves, if they do want to get their work out there, they and even if eventually, hey, listen, somebody listening to this, some kid out there is going to become an artist whose art is sold in galleries
Yeah.
across the country, across the world. Somebody is,
Yeah.
and whoever that kid is now will have to learn some of these skills. And even if they have a manager or a promoter, it's going to be wise for them to understand
Mhm.
business practices,
Yeah.
because maybe they're going to need to hire somebody to market their stuff. They're going to want to know what they're talking about. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's hard for artists too, because we tend to be a little squirrely.
Yeah.
I always say it's like corralling cats. We
Uh-huh.
go from one creative binge to
Right.
another.
The creative mind. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But so
Yeah.
knowing some business practices, super helpful.
Yeah.
Artists who don't like math, hey, listen, you need to know a little math. You want to
Yeah.
know how much money you have in your pocket,
Right.
and you want to know how to sell things and what you need to sell them for. So yeah.
I
So
would.
so students may go from high school into working for themselves. They may go into working for somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think too, there's so many new opportunities with YouTube and TikTok
Mm,
and Instagram. There's so many ways to be creative. I know one Instagrammer, he's a comedian. He makes $9,000 a post on Instagram for
yeah.
one
Yeah.
post,
Yeah.
because of collaborations and things. I mean, you have to build a following, but there's a lot of opportunities that weren't around, literally 5 years ago
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
creative people. And I would just say, just also be aware of who you want to be in life, like have integrity even when you're starting out, because things online don't necessarily go away.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And it's, I think being creative and being original are important. It is hard because there's so much out there. It's easy to fall into maybe creative patterns that have already been set. But even whether you're applying for a college, or you're creating a YouTube channel, or
Yeah.
you're creating original art, um, I know there's a lot, like kind of back to the college thing. I know that there are a lot of students that I see come through, and they like something like character design, for instance.
Mhm.
But like when you apply to a college, they don't want to see fan art. They don't
Right.
want to see that you have redone the same character that's already been done. They want to see your original
Mhm.
thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same for YouTube, for anything you do, for animation, for
Mhm.
fashion, for interior. Part of what makes you interesting is your unique perspective and your voice.
Yeah.
And so you have to be careful. You can see what works
Yeah.
and take from that, but also you need to not be afraid to express who you are, and trust that with this big giant world that we have at our fingertips,
Mhm.
that you're going to find your people and they're going to find you.
Right, right. So, and just to jump off of that, I would say if you're really into a certain genre or you're a fanfic kind of kid, that's great. Like,
Mhm. Yeah,
be who you are in your interests, but also read widely, look at different, genres of
yeah,
videos or TV or whatever to expand your horizons. So you have to feed yourself if you're an artist, right? You have to
yeah,
like continually give yourself a smorgasbord of ideas so that you have something to draw from. So
yeah,
keep
th-
reading, keep doing math, all the things.
yeah. Now
Yeah.
it's funny, there was a great exhibit at a museum. So I'm in upstate New York and I live close to the Vermont border. Uh, was it oh, was it, no, it's Massachusetts. It's right at we're right on the corner. Anyways, there's the Norman Rockwell Museum. It's like an hour away from me. And there was an artist there that I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but his name is Tony DiTerlizzi. He's written a few children's books and some, maybe I'll call them young teen books. But he's an illustrator and a writer. And when he's probably in his mid 50s.
Mhm.
So in the 80s, he was very big into the original Star Wars and he used to doodle and draw. And then he got into playing Dungeons and Dragons, and he'd always draw the cards, and a very fan fiction kind of thing, but for cards. And he always, that was his dream, was to be able to design cards for Dungeons and Dragons. Well, he continued to be an artist and pursue art, and eventually he kept sending them artwork. Eventually, he was picked up by Dungeons and Dragons and did illustrate some of their cards.
Mhm.
He has illustrated and written children's books, and he's done very well for himself. But it was fun to go to his exhibit and see his 14-year-old drawings and see his doodles from his notebook. And it was really cool to think, like, he actually back then said, I want to do this. And he did pursue, he studied other things, and some of his artwork is almost like I would say it's a little bit like John James Audubon, some of his work, but
Wow.
with fantastical, crazy creatures. It's
Oh,
really interesting. So I know that he's studied other things and he's talked about that. Um, and now I don't know what he's doing now, but I think he lives in the Boston area.
yeah.
But
Very
but
cool.
again, like, he kind of did the typical thing. He was a teen who wanted to work for like his favorite fan
Yeah.
place, and he eventually did.
Super
So it's not
cool.
to say that you can't,
Yeah.
and that fan fiction is wrong, but just know that you have to do other things, like you
Yeah.
said, have
Yeah.
some broad experiences, learn a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and then you'll bring it into your art, and it'll make it better. It'll make
I
it
love
so
it.
much more better.
I love it so much.
Yeah,
This has been a super informative podcast. I just really appreciate what you've brought to the show to tell
yeah,
parents and kids like you can be an artist, you can support yourself doing that, and
yeah,
there's different routes to get there. It's definitely
absolutely.
that you don't have to go to college necessarily, though that's a good option. What's the
Yeah.
one thing you would leave our listeners with about art and kids who are really arts and craftsy and want to do art as a vocation or a job?
I would say that there are more options out there than you can even imagine for a job. And that if that is something that God has put in your child and that child is a creative person, then they're really going to be most happy and most fulfilled if they find their way into doing that in their adult life. And
Mhm.
so there are options. And I think as homeschool parents, we've realized that over the last 15 or 20 years that there are lots of ways to get there. So for parents, I would encourage you to just be open and try new things. And for students, I would say you were made the way you were for a reason, and you have a really important perspective to share with the world. So keep pursuing it.
I love that so much. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is Lisa from It's Not That Hard to Homeschool and Julie Rohr from Excelsior Classes. It really isn't that hard to homeschool. Thanks for
Yep.
listening.
Thanks.